So every time you open up the Pringles or the
yeah.
Yoplait yogurt,
No
that is
kidding.
made in Pekin, Illinois. People don't know, but you go
No.
through and you see just these sheets and rolls of stuff being cut off. So
Wow.
it really is cool to go out and kind of to your point, Chris, like we want to showcase that. We've done a poster series now. I think we just had our 5th poster of Made in Illinois.
Yeah.
Again, 40, 50 different kind of things that are made here. And that's the cool thing about the job is going and seeing these tours and what actually is made here.
Well, joining us today at the table is Mark Denzler, President and CEO of the Illinois Manufacturers Association. Thanks for carving out some time to be with us.
Absolutely. You've asked me a half dozen times. I'm glad I could finally make it in here.
Yeah. And a Decatur native.
Right.
Might
Yeah.
add. Yep.
God-
You guys
God's
have known
country.
each other
Yeah, God's country, that's
for how many years? Long time, right?
since high school. He was same age as my sister, right?
Yeah,
Angie?
I actually had hair when we met, and we went to church together in Mount Zion. So I've known
right, I
Brad for a
forgot
long
about that.
time.
The interesting thing is you've known each other that long and he still agrees to see you.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, because not everybody does. That's for sure.
Right. So Mark and I met when I was at the Chamber of Commerce, and I have a ton of respect for the organization that you lead. It is so well done, and I never missed a government affairs call on Monday afternoons because you guys, if I'm not mistaken, don't you have a staff that reads every single bill word down to the last word that gets
We
filed
do,
each
and there
year?
are about 6,000 bills and amendments filed every single
Yes.
year. And a lot of them have an impact on businesses like Peerless and manufacturers. But yeah, we'll read every single bill, every single amendment. You know, some are repeats, we know, and others we send out to members to get their feedback. And then we're that conduit back to the members of the General Assembly.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, your legislative work is pretty amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So tell us about the state of manufacturing in Illinois these days.
Yeah, so briefly, the IMA, and we're really proud. We're 131 years old. Actually, on Saturday, we turned 131. We're the nation's oldest state manufacturing association, 18 months older than the National Association of Manufacturers. And if you like history, all 7 of our founding members are still around today. You heard of John Deere,
Oh, yeah.
ComEd, their predecessor, Western Electric, Amstead Industries. So really proud of that. But today we represent about 4,000 member companies and facilities and folks like Peerless that serve manufacturers in their time of need. But manufacturing today in Illinois, we got 650,000 men and women working directly. 14% of the state's economy. It's the single largest share. And then when you look at manufacturers, the ancillary jobs, the ones they support, every manufacturing job supports another 1.9. So when you look at it, about 1.8 million men and women are somehow connected to manufacturing, which is about a third of the workforce. So manufacturing's alive and well in Illinois. There are always challenges we have in Illinois, like every state has, but it's doing really, really well.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that
What kind of challenges did COVID bring you? Because I remember I was on a ski vacation, and I got the call from Randy Prince, and he said, "Hey, are you guys prepared to do what you do?" And talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we obviously knew COVID was coming from China and getting here, and we'd been working with the governor and his team about what was going to happen. And one of the things I'm really proud of with our team is we drafted the essential manufacturing language that allowed manufacturers and their suppliers to stay open during the pandemic. A number of states didn't. Actually, our language is used in about a dozen states, but like Pennsylvania shut down a lot of manufacturing. And look, you have to have food, right? You got to make sure that you have food on shelves, toilet paper, cleaning supplies, and some of those things. But it was a huge challenge. I was honored. The governor asked me to co-chair the equipment task force with John Conrad from iBio. And so we were in charge of helping the state make sure that you had ventilators and masks and gowns and all that kind of thing. And kind of a crazy time. In companies like yours, you know, every day there was a new rule, a new regulation. You know, you can only have 2 people in a golf cart, or you have to clean your facility, or you have to do this or that. And it was kind of a scary time, and you know, a lot of uncertainty.
But I knew you guys were on the front end of that. So
with manufacturing staying pretty wide open for the most part during COVID because of the work that you guys do, what did you see many of the manufacturers have to go to scaled down crews, or if they weren't working 2 and 3 shifts to go to 2 and 3 shifts? What kinds of challenges that individual companies face?
You know, it's a great question, Chris, and there were differences, right? Some you saw orders fall off because they made a product they didn't necessarily need at the time, but we saw actually a lot of innovation, and so. You know, a great story, there's a company up in Aurora, and they used to make metal shelving. And so at the time, people aren't buying metal shelving. They started making emergency hospital beds. And so they pivoted, and suddenly all of their beds are what were placed and ordered in McCormick Place when they thought they're going to have these big facilities. Diageo make a lot of spirits, right? They make Captain Morgan and all these kinds of things up in Plainfield. They quickly started making hand sanitizer.
Interesting.
And shipping that. Well, then they said, we've got big tankers, but we need plastic bottles. And so we found some folks down there, Charleston, that made plastic bottles and connected them so they could make the sanitizer. And so you saw a lot of companies really innovate and flip. But you know, when you talk about what was needed, again, people making food, you had to make sure you had that. But you also saw them downsize a little bit. So you know, Pepsi, for example, it used to have, 50 different SKUs of Diet Pepsi, vanilla, and cherry, and whatever. They saw what the people were buying, and they might have gone down to 10 or 12 SKUs, or certain Oreos or certain food brands. They made more of a shelf-stable product that people were demanding.
Gotcha.
Yeah, really interesting. So with some of the leading companies and I know you have 4,000 members, I think you mentioned a moment ago, are there companies that saw lasting change as a result of the pandemic that made their systems or their workforce, those kinds of changes that really left a mark?
Well, I would say the biggest challenge, and you see it here, right, is workforce, is getting people to show up for work. Manufacturers can't work remotely. That man or woman on the line that's making the food or making the the chemical, whatever it is, they have to be there on the line. But you saw a lot of people staying home, and so it's still a challenge to get people back to work, particularly in the office space. So that was probably the biggest lasting change that you saw. It was really that workforce issue, and there's still challenges today where you see companies starting to try to get their employees come back 5 days a week. And back when you could find a job easily, people would say, hey, I'm staying home 3 or 4 days. And now that the market's getting a little bit tighter, I think you're going to start seeing companies that are going to start requiring, about 4 or 5 days a week. And I actually think with the new administration in Washington, it wouldn't shock me to see incoming President Trump demand that all federal workers return to work 5 days a week.
Is that right?
Interesting.
Yeah, you are seeing more and more of that nationally. Large companies that are bringing people back in 4 or 5 days and feeling the stress and the strain over those decisions.
Right,
for sure.
because before that person's going to say, hey, I'm going to get a new job, and it was relatively easy to do it. A little bit more of a struggle for that man or woman to find another job today. But workforce is the biggest probably long-term change that we've seen coming out of it. And then the second, Chris, is really supply chain, particularly in the manufacturing space. Manufacturers had gone to lean manufacturing over a couple of decades and kind of we called it just in time, right? And so you look at Toyota plant in Indiana, and we've got Toyota Bashuka on this side, and they make the seats that go in. And you see as they come off the line, here's a brown seat that's got an 8-way reclining seat, and here's the gray, and it's got a 6-way. And literally, they come off the line here, they get shipped 20 miles to the Toyota plant. As they come off that truck, they immediately go into a vehicle. Well, we saw during the pandemic, you saw facilities shut down in China or in Asia or in Europe. Well, all of a sudden, that snarled the supply chain. When they couldn't get that product, you couldn't make it here. And so I think what we've seen, and you talk about American manufacturing, is a lot of these companies are now reshoring back to the United States instead of all their eggs in one basket with 1 or 2 suppliers. Now they have 4 or 5 or 6 suppliers. And then the other big change, it used to be just in time, and now they call it kind of just in case. Well, do we keep 2 weeks of supplies or 4 weeks? And as you all know, that's an asset on your balance sheet. So those companies are all trying to figure out, how much inventory do we keep? Because if one of our suppliers does go down, we want to make sure we can continue operating.
Interesting. So, will the new administration in Washington, like the tariffs, how does that affect manufacturing and your folks in Illinois?
Yeah, so a lot of our manufacturers are excited by the incoming administration from a regulatory standpoint. I mean, manufacturers are one of the most regulated industries, if the not most regulated industry. And so I think you're going to see an ease of some of these regulations. Again, we're not opposed to regulations. They have to be smart. They have to be sensible. Manufacturers want to make sure we protect the environment, the air and the water and the ground and those types of things. But you also don't want to kill the golden goose.
Right.
And so I think you're going to see a lot of regulatory pullback from the Trump administration, rolling back some of the things that you've seen with the Biden administration. And then you look at tariffs, and there's a lot of concern on the part of manufacturers that the president may come in with kind of a sledgehammer approach. And you've heard this 60% tariff across the board. Our manufacturers, I think the one thing that unites everybody in D.C. is they don't like China. But you have to keep in mind that folks like Japan and Canada are good allies of us. And so if you want to kind of isolate China, maybe it doesn't make sense to put a tariff on a product coming from Canada or Japan or as much. So there's a little bit of concern about what a tariff policy may look like. And certainly at the end of the day, consumers pay the cost. At the end of the day, I don't care who it is, those prices get passed on. So if a manufacturer has to pay more for a metal, for example, or a chemical, whatever that product may be, at the end of the day, it's the business or the consumer that pays the price.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. What do you what are the significant challenges you think Illinois will face on a state level and businesses as a result of the new administration in Washington, D.C., given the political nature of the state of Illinois versus the new administration in D.C.?
It's a great question. We get asked a lot. And as you see, I mean, California and Illinois and New York they're dark blue states, right? Heavily Democratic states. And you're starting to see leadership that, instead of maybe moderating back to, okay, the country voted for incoming President Trump, you're starting to see them stand up. I think the governor said, if you're going to come for my people, you have to come through me. And they're calling it, quote, Trump-proofing Illinois. So we're going to see in the lame duck session, which is in early January, the governor and members of the General Assembly, Democrat members, are going to kind of Trump-proof it. And certain things they may try to pass a state-level OSHA, Occupational Safe and Health Administration. They may try to lock in some of the federal environmental regulations and say that Illinois can be no less restrictive than they are today in Washington. And so, again, that regulatory battle that we were talking about a few minutes ago, Governor Pritzker and Governor Newsom and Governor Hochul in New York, they've kind of stood up and say, hey, we're gonna try to battle back. And so I think you're going to see a lot of those battles where the federal government may roll back some of these regulations, and you may see a state of Illinois try to implement some of those regulations.
Gotcha. In essence, to lock them in at where they are today on a federal level.
Correct. There's another one called Waters of the U.S. It's been this political battle back and forth in D.C., where they're trying to, quote, protect certain water, and farmers don't like it because here's a stream that goes through my property, but it's not a wetland. And so we saw last year they introduced legislation. I can see that coming back of them trying to lock that in. So it's going to be a big regulatory battle, and with Trump and his administration trying to roll some of these back, I think you're going to see Illinois and some of these blue states try to lock those in.
Gotcha.
Which makes it more difficult for employers to compete. I mean, we're competing within the state, but we're competing against other states and other countries. And so if we're competing against Indiana or Ohio or Wisconsin, and a company's making a decision, for example, about where to locate, where they want to grow, sometimes those state policies make the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned earlier your legislative team that I know does such great work. What would you say in 2024 was maybe a handful of your biggest accomplishments or wins at the state legislature?
Yeah, one of the really big wins during COVID and recently is the unemployment insurance benefit. The employers pay the taxes on that. If UI benefits fall below, we have to borrow money from the federal government. We had a $2 billion balance. Suddenly we were $5 billion in debt. Those are all taxes paid by employers. We were able to use about $4 billion in ARPA money to offset that, which was fortunate because that saved employers from paying $4 billion in taxes. So that was a huge win.
What's ARPA?
The American Rescue Plan that was passed.
Some of the COVID,
some of the COVID money, some of the federal COVID money, where a lot of states spent on other programs.
Okay,
this is one where they said, "Hey, we're going to help employers," and that was a big battle that Rob Carr, the retail merchants, and the IMA helped lead on that to try to use that money. Obviously, there were a lot of problems with UI benefits and a lot of fraud. And we didn't think it was fair for businesses. Peerless, for example, the IMA is an employer, whomever it is, Caterpillar, to pay higher taxes particularly for a lot of fraud that occurred in the system. And so that was a big one. Coming up, a big battle, Chris and Brad, is going to be energy. You hear it a lot.
Yeah.
We've with some of the state policies, we're seeing closure of what we call baseload, which is coal and gas plants, in favor of renewable. The problem is we don't have enough renewable coming online at a time when we're building data centers. They're popping up like the old wind farms, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're getting data centers right and left. They use a lot of energy, tons of energy.
Right? Yeah.
You have a new quantum center that the IMA was part of with the governor. He announced on the old U.S. Steel site in Chicago. Crazily exciting. I mean, this technology is game-changing for manufacturing, for cybersecurity. they lose. If you think data center uses a lot of energy, wait to see what a quantum facility and a cryogenics at near zero use. So we have to have enough energy for manufacturers, for our homes, and that's going to be really the battle, not only in Illinois, but across the country, because as they're moving toward a cleaner economy, right? And we don't want coal, we don't want gas, but you have to have something. We've seen California actually reverse course a little bit. Governor Newsom campaigned on getting rid of their one nuclear facility and gas. They're now keeping their nuclear facility open, and they have about $6 billion in the budget for 5 new gas plants. So
interesting.
We've got to make sure that we have enough power. And in a year and a half ago, they thought energy increases would be about 1%. They're now saying about 3 to 4%. And when you look at globally, we're adding 1,000 terabytes of energy every year, which is the equivalent of putting a country like Japan on the grid globally every single year. So we have to make sure we have energy. You want to flip the lights, and you want to make sure they go on.
Yeah, wait till you turn on the light switch and they don't come on.
Correct.
Or turn on the AC and it doesn't cool.
Absolutely. And we've seen problems in Texas and California and in Germany where you had some rolling brownouts. We don't want that to happen in Illinois.
Yeah.
Do you think you mentioned California has kind of rolled back some of their regulation on energy. Do you see the possibility of that in the state of Illinois?
I'm hopeful that they'll take a look at it, and they put some hard deadlines in that you have to close these by a certain date. We've seen some premature closing because companies have said, I'm not going to keep operating, putting tens or hundreds of millions in investment when I could not get the return on it.
Right.
We're hoping that they'll reevaluate that. There's some energy discussion going on. The technology is just not there for battery storage, for example. We only use about a third of the power generated in wind farms are actually used because we don't have battery storage. So as technology gets better, it may be there, but sometimes politically driven solutions and mandates don't actually meet the science that's out there.
Yeah, no, makes total sense. You guys just finished recently. My timing would be off. It feels like maybe 6 to 8 weeks ago, where you do your, I'm going to call it your manufacturing bus tour around Illinois. Talk a little bit about that, because it's a really cool deal.
I would say one of the fun things that we've done, and I became CEO in 2019, is really showcase manufacturing. Right? We want to showcase the great companies that are here, the jobs that are here, and so this is our 30 annual. We call it Makers on the Move bus tour. We wrap a 56-foot bus. We drive around the state. This year we did about 45 stops. Actually, it was wrapped here at Ace Sign, so Todd Brinket.
I saw that.
This year we had a student design contest, and the student that won was from Capital Area Career Center, which is why we kicked off the bus tour here. And then we do, I think it was 2,500 miles over 8 or 9 days, 40-plus stops.
Is it 8 consecutive days?
It is.
Right.
It is 8 consecutive days. We ended this year at the University of Illinois at the Research Park of the reception, and we had the bus at the tailgate the next day at the football game, beautiful weather. But again, just showcasing what's out there. And the thing I love tours of manufacturing. And people have heard of Caterpillar and John Deere, right? You make the big bulldozers and the mining trucks and Decatur, Brad, and the combines, but people don't realize all the White House china is made in Antioch, Illinois.
See, I didn't know that.
Dinger baseball bats in Southern Illinois. Kyle with the Cubs when he hit the famous home run that hit the thing. Those are made in Southern Illinois. Shutt Sports makes NFL football helmets. In Illinois. All the Red Salvation Army kettles are made in Chicago. I mean, it's fun to go around and see the stuff that's made here. There's a small company called Winpack Heat Seal in Pekin, Illinois, middle of nowhere. They make 90% of the foil lids for food. So every time you open up the Pringles or the Yoplait yogurt, that is made in Pekin, Illinois. People don't know, but you go through and you see just these sheets and rolls of stuff being cut off. So it really is cool to go out and kind of to your point, Chris, like we want to showcase that. We've done a poster series now. I think we just had our 5th poster of Made in Illinois. Again, 40, 50 different kind of things that are made here. And that's the cool thing about the job is going and seeing these tours and what actually is made here.
We get that poster every year. I love looking at it because, I mean, I didn't know half the things that were on there that were made in Illinois. Is there a really, really cool manufacturing facility? You're like, wow. Like, is Rivian amazing?
Rivian is really cool.
Comes to mind.
They joined us. They had about 50 employees. They now have 9,000. So it's the old Mitsubishi facility in Bloomington. At their maximum, they were about 3,000 employees. So when you think Rivian's already at 9,000 employees, they just bought 400 acres for supplier part, growing like crazy. And you know, I grew up in Decatur, and,
Right.
and you guys are both downstate guys, and people have this mentality that manufacturing was dark, dirty, and dangerous, right? And it's not. It's smart, sexy, and sustainable, as I like to say. But you go, and sometimes people, I say that and say, I can't Google sexy or my computer will flag it. But you know, the neat thing about it is when you go into a manufacturing facility, they are clean, and they're autonomous, and they're high tech. They're not dirty anymore. I mean, you literally could eat off the floor. And Gum Brands up in Schaumburg, so they make, you know, the toothbrush and toothpaste and that kind of thing. Like, nobody touches their product until the guy on the forklift puts it into a truck to ship. And you really see the robots and the technology. All that stuff is really, really cool. Haribo, candy manufacturer. Again, nobody touches the product until it's being loaded into a semi-truck. But, you know, you look at some of them, like going to a Skittles factory in Yorkville. I mean, to see the rainbow of colors coming down the chute is pretty cool.
Well, it's just like we had Mellow Cream on, Chad. I didn't know Mellow Cream, the big facility out there on the West End, was not a retail. But, you know, they make those and sell them nationally.
Yeah, Chad's fantastic. I mean, he does so much with the Sangamon CEO program. We had a bus tour stop there last year. And when you think of Springfield, right, you don't think Mellow Cream is a manufacturer. You have Brandt. You obviously have Bunn. I mean, coffee pots that are shipped around the world. You know, Richardson Manufacturing, Solomon Colors. I mean, you know, people don't think of Springfield as a manufacturing town, and it's not huge, but there's a lot of manufacturing in and around this area.
Yeah, it's funny. We had lunch. It's been back a while now with Rich and Adam Solomon, and I just wanted to introduce Brad to them. I got to know him well during my days at the Chamber, and it's a company that a lot of people don't even know exists here. I have no idea. And again, like Mellow Cream, everybody thinks, or most people think, well, that they supply the donuts for all the retail shops here.
I mean, you think Todd Brinkhead at Ace Sign. I mean, they make signs for the Super Bowl, and you know, I'm actually going to be with Todd a little bit later today. So if you ever go to Vegas and you go to the north side of the strip and you see the big light show that's at 3 or 4 block strip, that's Watchfire Signs in Danville built that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So Danville, Illinois, when you walk on Fremont Street in Las Vegas, that whole above
that's Danville.
Sign, that's
No
Danville,
kidding.
Illinois. Watchfire Signs.
Did not know that.
I love those stories, like the things you were just talking about that are made in Illinois that people have no idea. Most of those that you mentioned, I had no idea.
National Safety Apparel in Chicago, they make the uniforms for post office workers, for fire departments, you know, all that kind of stuff. So, you know, when you see most of the United States Postal Service employees, when they're walking, those are all made in Chicago today.
That's pretty cool.
And so, again, when you get out and about and you really see it, I learn every day. I'll go into a facility and be like, okay, what is this? Gilster Mary Lee, you never heard of, private brand, private food manufacturer, and you guys are big sports fans. So they have 7 facilities in Illinois and 7 in Missouri. They're headquartered in Chester, home of Popeye. So they make the store brands, but they make all the breading for Chick-fil-A, number one. But they make, guess what? Flutie Flakes, Mahomes Crunch, Josh's Jacks from Jacksonville, or Josh Allen from out there, Caitlin Clark Crunch. All those cereals are made in Southern Illinois. And under a brand, but private brand label. So they make Walmart brand and Kroger brand and everything else. But pretty cool. All that kind of stuff. And, you know, everyone remembers Flutie Flakes kind of as the first big one. But all those are made in Southern Illinois.
That's cool.
It is pretty amazing. So when you were talking earlier about the number of men and women employed in manufacturing, I think you said around 650,000 throughout the state. Do you see that over your time at the IMA? Have you seen that number grow? Is it stable? What's the future for manufacturing look like in the state of Illinois?
Yeah, when you look at the number, and it's an interesting point, and be careful. So at the turn of the century, so 25 years ago, we had 900,000 people employed. We're at 650,000 now, but our share of the gross product has gone up and productivity has gone up. And why is that? Because on that line, you might not need 10 or 20 people making that product. You may need 2.
Technology, right?
The skills are different. So my dad worked the old Staley Manufacturing Company in Decatur, and you know, it used to be you walked out of high school, you walked to the factory in town, you worked for 40 years, you retired, and you were done. Now you need additional training or skills. I mean, no different working at Peerless. I mean, you can train them, and so maybe you need community college or trade school or technical, or maybe the company trains you. You know, you don't have to have a 4-year degree, but these are great jobs. They average $80,000 a year in wages and benefits. So maybe it's not that person on the production line, but maybe they're doing CAD design. Maybe they're programming the computers. It's a higher skill level. So the number of jobs are down. The pay is up substantially. The skills are up substantially. But the neat thing about manufacturing is you could work on the production floor, right? You could be an engineer, you could be marketing, you could be communications, you can be accounting. I mean, there's so many different roles that are available in manufacturing today, and they are hiring. Nationally, during the pandemic, we talked about it got to a point where there were 1.2 million open manufacturing jobs. Wow. After World War II, when they started tracking, the highest they'd ever had was 437,000. So we were triple the number. We're still about 500,000 open jobs nationally, which is higher than before the pandemic. So there are still good manufacturing jobs available.
Yeah. When you look across Illinois and what's taking place in manufacturing, what are some of the highlights that are exciting, encouraging to your folks and your team at the IMA? I know there's some really cool stuff happening in Decatur. We had Cara Demers,
TCCI.
What would be some highlights?
Yeah, well, in kind of important, I think it's going to continue to grow quickly, and I'll pivot it. And part of the reason is, look, we have a great thing. We have central location. We're one of 2 states with all 6 Class 1 railroads. We have access to water that, the southern states don't have. Chicago, global city, global airport. When we're talking, I was just with the governor on trade mission to Japan. We were in London earlier. For companies that want to be able to fly in and out directly from overseas, that's a huge thing having Chicago. And then the University of Illinois, an hour away, graduates more engineers than the next 3 schools combined.
Is that right?
And so we have a lot of advantages that are going here. And when you look at, particularly, Chris, some of the areas, this whole quantum thing is crazy. I used to watch Quantum Leap with Scott Bakula when I was a kid, right? And I knew quantum from that. But this quantum technology and this quantum computer and what it's going to do and the speed and what it's going to do for cybersecurity, or you think about, it's AI essentially. The fact that we're in the lead for that, and the governor, I give him all kinds of credit for making sure, we so much was created at the U of I, Mosaic and some of these software, they all went to Silicon Valley, and the governor's committed to keeping quantum here. So immediately after PsiQuantum, who's our keynote speaker at our lunch, made the decision to come here, $500 million investment. DARPA, which is Defense Special Agency, they think of Q and James Bond. That's what they do for our government. It's called DARPA. It was created in 1957 after the Russians launched Sputnik, and we were surprised, and the U.S. government said we never want to be surprised again. DARPA announced a $250 million investment. So I think that quantum, you've heard Microsoft and others, that's going to be really attractive, and that's going to be a magnet for folks coming in. But you really think of what's happening in life sciences is going to be amazing in Lake County, city of Chicago. But you think this whole IFAB hub in Decatur to Champaign to Danville and bioprocessing, fermentation. Illinois got one of, I think, 10 grants in the country, about $52 million. We got the most. Primient and ADM and U of I. They anticipate that's a $20 billion growth sector. And guess what we have? We have corn and soybeans and processing. We're perfectly poised. And then you talk about Cara at TCCI in Decatur. What they're doing in partnership with Richland Community College and University of Illinois, and they're building a climatic lab where they're building this building, and it's going to be open soon, that you can test all this technology. And it'll go, I don't know, it's 30 below zero to 130 degrees. So you're testing this new compressor, this new vehicle. You put it in this building, and you can test it in extreme conditions, and that's going to be right here in central Illinois.
Yeah, that is cool.
Yeah.
45 minutes away, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so there's a lot of cool stuff that are going, a lot of growth, as I talked about, companies wanting to move supply chains back home, and I think Illinois is well positioned. Again, we got policy challenges. Every state does. We face the same national challenges, same global. If we can get Illinois policies right, then we're ahead of the competition. And I will give credit to the governor and General Assembly. We've really redone the incentive packages.
Yes.
They were old and stale. We've made huge strides in that. We just got to make sure we're not too regulatory and doing, we want to make sure we're all working together.
Yeah, I've heard you use the word before over the years about just moderating our policies. Some of the regulatory conditions, even to moderate a little bit.
Correct.
Can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. We're not against regulation. They just have to be smart and sensible, right? Sure. You can protect the environment while allowing manufacturers or dry cleaning. You guys have a ton of regulations as well. You just have to make sure they're common sense, right? And you can't be too far this way, too far that way. And that's one of the things happening in the country. We just everyone's in the middle, and let's just make sure they're common sense.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah. Moving into, and we want to be respectful of your time. Moving into 2025. What are you most excited about for the IMA and manufacturing in our state? And what do you see as the biggest challenge?
Yeah, I mean, again, showcasing manufacturing is great. We're going to kick off this program. I'm leaking it here. So we're going to do this program for Century Manufacturers. Have been around 100 years. That's not public yet, but it is now.
Yep,
so,
sure.
Breaking news on your show here on the table. You're going to see that come out. Energy and challenge is going to be a big fight. There is a big battle right now where they want to eliminate natural gas. And so I know, Brad, you're an executive chef at home. You like your gas stove.
Absolutely,
make you go to electric. You don't like that. I mean, but your restaurants and your chefs. But for manufacturers that use a lot of energy and they have to use gas, you look at an ADM that has gas fire to create steam.
Sure.
So that's going to be a huge challenge, this whole energy space. Washington just had a big referendum. People like gas, right? It's cheap, it's sustainable, it's easy to use, and that's going to be a big battle, particularly if you're low income. You're asking someone to get away from gas and become electric. They get by electric heat pump. I mean, it's going to cost thousands and thousands of dollars and not affordable. So energy is going to be a big, big challenge. Workforce continues to be a challenge, but I'm optimistic that I think less regulation from the federal government is going to rocket fuel, I think, to the manufacturing economy. One of the biggest things, I was in D.C. a week ago. I think right out of the gate, you're going to see the Tax Cut and Jobs Act that was passed in 2017 by the president. Those are all expiring this year. So I think that'll be the first order of business that you'll see really is how can we incent manufacturing and other industries through good tax policy. So I think that'll add rocket fuel to the manufacturing economy. And again, I think Illinois is positioned, just our central location, water, energy, we're in a good place to grow.
Well, that's encouraging.
Yeah, it really is. So we always ask folks when they come on the table this question.
I got to go. Sorry, it's time.
You've had quite the career, and in a, I'll say, industry that's not always the easy one when you're dealing with various political influences and the like. If you could look back 30 years and give your younger self advice based on your life experience, what might that advice be? Professionally and or personally?
Take better care of my hair. I think. You guys, you're my jealous.
You have a good head.
I'm jealous of you two. I would say people ask me a lot, particularly young people. I'm on the board of Illinois Wesleyan about mentoring. I said, communications is so important. I mean, anybody that can communicate, and again, we're doing a podcast here, and here you can get your message out. And in this society, especially with everyone, it's a tweet and it's a quick, and people don't talk as much. I think that communication skill is critically important. And going back, I took some communication courses. I probably wish I would have taken a few more. I think that, number one, and just personal interaction. I tell everybody, don't go to your room and play video games. Like, there has to be this back and forth talk. I mean, we probably could have recorded this over Zoom, right? And you could have aired it somehow there, but you lose that connection. And I just think we have to make sure we continue that personal interaction, that personal connection. It's you talking to customers. When I come in and drop out my dry clean, you're always here. Hey, thanks for your business. I appreciate it. You guys are here at your store. When you're seeing your customers, it'd be easy for you to be in the back. You have one person, you drop it off. And so I think that personal interaction is something that I learned. Tell everybody today, and particularly young people, don't just get buried in your basement and do everything by phone. Go talk to people.
And you're good at that. You're one of the guys when I walk in a room and see you, I can't wait to say hi to you. You know what I mean? Seriously.
Yeah. And you have to do that. It just we've lost a lot of that, and particularly for young people. That's a piece of advice I give them.
Great advice.
stuff.
We always say every good thing that ever happens happens through relationships.
Absolutely. And buy low, sell high is always a good one, too.
I'm still trying to figure that one out.
Hey, Mark, thanks for your
thank
time.
you.
Thanks for the work that you do for our business community throughout the state and really nationally.
Well, thank you guys. I mean, and a shout out to Brad and Chris at Peerless. I mean, everything you guys do for the community. I see your name all over. Anytime anybody calls, you don't do it for the credit. But you guys are just, not only do you employ people, but you're great corporate citizens, and you do a lot in the community. So thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yep.